We're back again. Hello, guys, to the Trek Away. Grey
Howdy.
Gamer and myself, Trev, Trainspot Trev, whatever. I guess this isn't a gaming handle, so Trev, Grey. That's much simpler.
Trev Gray. Yeah.
Um, we decided. Oh, it was Grey's suggestion initially, but it was a good idea. We were doing some specials. We were doing like best top 5 and whatnot, but I don't think they're as popular. And by all means, tell me if I'm wrong below in the comments below, as always, because like what people want to see is kind of what I, to an extent, willing to do. We've got to enjoy doing it great at the same time. So if someone's want to talk about the hull plating on different starships, the colour of it or whatnot, then I might give that one a miss. But you know, if it's something interesting and decent, maybe.
We're not knocking anybody.
We're not knocking. Well, listen. So we thought people tend to prefer the review format, but with no new Trek at the moment, not for another 3-4 weeks or so. So we decided, partly because of Gray's initial suggestion to talk about some of the TOS episodes that he recommended to me, and we thought it would be like the top, I don't know, 5 or 6 or so, and I had a look through them, and then I suggested to Gray The Ultimate Computer, Season 2, Episode 24, which is one of the best. Gray said that. I, after watching it, probably have to agree as well. And I went back and watched it a second time within the space of a month or two because I wanted to be fresh for the view. Like we do with a new episode of Trek, Gray. We just watch it that day, and then we do the notes the same day and or the notes the second day after, and then fresh in our mind. So we done something similar. So did Greg. He watched it yesterday just to refresh his memory, even though he's probably seen it a shit ton of times. Yeah. And you had to watch it again, really?
You know, I like it. I always like it. I can always watch TOS over and over. It's great.
Yeah, fair enough.
The other thing too we wanted to make or say is that there is a relevancy in this episode because in Picard season 3, as well as other past Star Trek shows here and there, they tend to refer every once in a while to Daystrom, the Daystrom Institute. Daystrom created the computers. You keep hearing the name thrown around.
That's
this is the first time we've ever seen the original Daystrom, the real guy. And this is brought into the TOS episode. This is after you'll see. We'll explain it as we go in there. But so there's the relevancy of why you hear Daystrom all the time. Who the heck is Daystrom? And here he is.
That's true. True, mate. That's relevance is kind of important to what we've been watching recently. What was his first name? Do you remember? Is it Richard? I can't remember his first name.
I think so.
Yeah, Richard.
I think it was. Yeah.
And I kept spelling his name wrong, so I had to go back and change it. I was putting Daystrom rather than Daystrom.
Yeah,
so I've updated
English
it.
language. It does strange things.
It does. So yeah, I done the exact same thing. I took some notes, maybe not as in depth as I normally do, because I kind of like that. I just some notes to keep my mind relevant and fresh, and then I can elaborate on them because I don't want to be reading from a script. That's dull and boring. And Gray's added in points as well that he thinks are important, or not important. Not well, maybe hopefully not notes that I've missed. Hopefully just notes that you think are relevant, mate. Because some things I miss out, I guess, on purpose. But with further ado, we'll kick off, mate. Now, Gray, I struggled to, while having a copy of the original TOS without the remaster, Gray, kind enough to give me a copy of the remaster because we both own our own copies there. So he gave me the remaster version because I struggled to find that. I couldn't get hold of it where I was. So, and I have to say that it is a lot better. Gray and I touched on this just literally before we were coming on to record. And I said to Gray, just hold it for a few more minutes because we're going to talk about it right off the bat. So yeah, it is an improvement. And Gray's possibly answered what I was going to talk about. And that was that, yes, it looked improved, but it's hard to describe. I thought they would go for higher quality in that, like what they've done with the Next Generation. So they massively overhauled the the graphics there as well. It looked better, maybe because it had a better base level to go from Grey than obviously a 60s TV
Yeah.
show
Oh
did.
yeah.
So,
It definitely did.
but the TOS show, I thought they would go further to maybe not quite the movie standard, but almost the movie standard, because the movie CGI for the limited computer power and graphics they had was brilliant, I thought.
Mhm.
And then you said to me, well, you could tell me what you said, why you
Okay.
probably didn't go that far.
I remember when I was reading a good long while back when they were planning on the remastering, and it came up as to how are we going to handle the special effects, because we know we want to do it much better, uh, but we don't. And this was really important. They didn't want to break the integrity or feel of the older TOS stuff. So I know it's hard to understand, but the best way I could explain it is that they made new old effects,
Mm,
if that makes any
yeah,
sense.
it's a good way.
So
It's a good way of describing it.
so what they literally did is they looked at the exact scene of what was happening, and most of the time, not every time, but most of the time, all they did was create a much better looking Enterprise, planets, stars, everything, the movement, the whole 9 yards. But it did the same thing if you look at it clip by clip from the other one as it did in the original.
Yeah.
Now, there were a few differences because in the original TOS back then, cost a lot of money to do effects. And let's face it, in the 60s, late 60s, they didn't have stuff like we have today. Um, so many times the Enterprise, which was a real model up against a green screen or whatever, back then they were blue screens. And basically the ship really only did a couple of things. It went this way, it went this way, it went this way, and that's about it. I mean, it didn't really you didn't
The,
really
the,
see it turn or pivot
the
or do
original
anything like that.
Starship Enterprise has never taken a left or a right turn ever.
Pretty much, right. And if it did, unfortunately, the old effects, it kinda went, and it didn't look, I mean, back then, of course, I was young and it was like everything was great then. But the point is that that didn't look real. So in those particular instances where they could take some poetic license, so to speak, they had the ship do a curve, they had the ship do a turn, they had the ship do a pivot,
Yeah.
where it made sense. But they didn't want to go so far as to make it too modern. Because if you did, like for instance, I'll give you a good
Takes
example.
away the
In
authenticity.
Right, and in all the remasters, when you see the original Enterprise, you never see the original Enterprise do the warp effect like they created when the movies came
Yeah,
out.
gutted.
Where you just see it, where you just see it go when it disappears, right? That's not in the remaster TOS, and they battled that one because they said they felt it would have been too much because they wanted to again try to retain the integrity of what was,
Yeah.
but just make it as best looking as they possibly could. And I think overall, especially to an old Star Trek fan like me, I loved it. I mean, I couldn't believe how good it looked. I mean, I've never seen the original Enterprise look that good, that smooth. And even when they and the one thing about this particular episode, not many episodes because again of cost and everything, were they able to have more than one or two starships. Okay, in this they have four or five starships, which is
Yeah.
really unusual. And then this was so great because I could tell just by looking at it that the effects guys must have had a blast with this one. Because they're sitting there going like, "Ooh, now we can really go to town." And they made every ship, the Lexington and the other ships in this episode look so good. And they had them in formation. And there were scenes where the Enterprise was firing on one of the ships, and you could see how clean and crisp and clear those phasers looked coming out of the old Enterprise. Still coming out of where they're supposed to be coming out of, but they look much better, much cleaner and crisper. It was just like, wow. The other
Huh.
thing that they did too, and you may have probably noticed that they used the original negatives for the film when they did the remastering. So they went back on the original negatives, remastered those. So if you look at it, the colors, the clarity looks really brilliant. Whereas like years ago, again when I was a kid, they used to rerun the episodes all the time. Yeah, you had the film grain look kind of thing going on, and and they would be a little bit kind of fuzzy, a little here and there and stuff. And yet they were able to take the original negative, really go through the remaster process like they do when they restore old movies that look new now.
Yeah.
They did the same thing, and it looked. I've never seen the episodes look that good. I mean,
When did they
it's
do
just
that? When did they do the overhaul, the upgrade?
it was. I'm
Early
gonna say it was
2000s?
Yeah, I think it was at least whatever 10, 15 years ago. I think when they
Yeah,
did this.
okay.
I mean, it's been some time. I don't
Listen.
remember exactly, but yeah, it's just it. And this series really needed it, badly. So now it's just so much more alive to me. And
Yeah.
the good thing for you is that even though to you it's going to be a wee bit more dated than it will be to me because I grew up with it, it still looks a hell of a lot better for you to enjoy it now
Yeah.
as opposed to you
That's a
probably wouldn't have been able to put up with the with the
yeah.
effects in the original.
No, that's a good point, Gray. You explained it nicely. I probably couldn't have because it's just too much of a step down. It's like you not want to play the 8-bit graphics, which we joke about on
Yeah.
our on the Extreme PC UK podcast that we do our friend Nick, because it's too dated. Even though you grew up with them, that's ironic. But yeah, I'm like you. I grew up with them as well to an extent, and I don't look back. I don't like to go back on what I've done in the past for that kind of thing.
Okay.
So it's
Yep.
the same for me when it comes to this. We start off with better graphical overhaul, but keeping it authentic to the original, keeping that bit of kind of rustic, kind of 60s vibe to it, and not going too much. So I actually agree with you, mate, there. As much as it would have been nice to see the TOS movie graphics, that was just the right way to do it. Although it is
Yeah.
annoying that the warp effect is, they should have added that in, because I'm sorry, mate, when you see the ship going to warp in this, it's just looks like Impulse. There's no any, even in the remastered
Yeah.
version, there's no way to
Yeah.
distinguish between Impulse and Warp. And I'm sorry, everyone knows with those graphics available to them in the remaster that the stars going past are a realistic effect of if you
Yeah.
were to travel at warp. So that should have been in with the updated tools. That's my only gripe. Apart from that, yeah, it looks fantastic, mate.
I also think there's one more problem with the effect, not just the fact of keeping it true to the 60s. It's the actual overall length. The problem is that you can't make the episodes longer than they were. So that means if you have a scene of the Enterprise doing whatever it's doing, and you try to put in a warp effect, that adds another 2 or 3 seconds. If you do it
Yeah,
again, it adds another 3 or 4 seconds.
true.
Before you know it, you've added 30, 25, 30 seconds, and that ain't flying.
Why
So
not?
that's probably a secondary consideration that they did,
True, true, true.
but everything else, it's cool. I mean, it was just nice seeing it, just beautiful looking. Anyway,
They've done it the right way. So yeah, we'll kick
okay.
off with this here, and if people like this kind of reviewing old episodes, and it can be from anything. It can be from any of the other Star Trek series. Just let us know what's your favourite and why, and we may try. We may go over it and cover it, especially if it's one we like as well. But of course, the only way to do that is comment below and let us know, and give us a thumbs up to say that you do like it. And don't have to look at this and this. You can listen to us and wherever you get your podcast from.
And by
Where,
the way, look at the sharp shirt that Trev has on. Yeah, pretty nice there.
and he has the Trekway mug as well. So, and I don't mean his face. I mean the literal cup. So, but yeah. So we'll kick off, and yeah, we finally get to see considering I'm starting this way and working my way back, I finally get to see Dr. Daystrom, who back in the 60s, bear in mind, there wasn't as many, I would say, people of colour on TV and these kind of prominent
Right.
shows that Gray's mentioned in the past, and it's a kind of obvious thing that wasn't
Yeah.
a big deal back then, but the fact that this guy, he was a black actor, and he's in there in a prominent role, and he does a good job as well. I don't remember the actor's real name, and if you do, Gray, you can pipe in, but I don't. He is the original founder. He's literally Mr. Robotics, Mr. Genius of the Star Trek era. He done the original. What was?
Just the actor's name is William Marshall.
There you go, Willie Marshall. He done the original Duotronics circuitry, that kind of level of computing on the TOS version of Star Trek, and he is the true kind of brains really behind the advances and technology going forwards, especially when it comes to computing and computing power. And this is his next big thing that he's bringing along, Gray. He has AI. He's invented a computer that can literally do it all. And the reason, like Gray mentioned, we brought that up is because They've had that in Star Trek Picard in recent times, and also as well to an extent, and well, not to an extent, and was it season 2 of Discovery, where you literally had Central, I think they called it, like the heart of the Federation was literally controlled by bloody AI, and you couldn't get anywhere near the thing. It took over a body and went nuts and started trying to, along with Section 31, trying to take everyone down. I did like that angle. And we've seen it more than once, Gray, like AI in Star Trek trying to
Well,
take
the
things on.
interesting thing about this is that being so, back in the late 60s and everything, yes, there were some science fiction stories that kind of went on the subject matter of this, of what would happen if a computer took over, but it was never really done much, if any, on TV or movies until Trek did it.
Yeah.
So again, you see it a lot now, the story of
Many
computer
first
goes
with Trek.
rogue thing, but Star Trek did it first, pretty much, or one of the first. So this is, and so when you look at this episode, anybody goes back and looks at it, try to remember that this came before, way before,
Yeah.
all the other people started doing it.
Yeah.
And Daystrom, like you mentioned, is, if it wasn't for Daystrom's discovery in the Star Trek universe, the computers never would have been so advanced to run a starship. So, and he did that in his early 20s. In this episode, he's 45. That there's a relevance to that we won't get into yet.
Yeah,
But
he if you think about Star Trek Enterprise, the show, the precursor to that, the computing was very basic. I mean, it probably state of the art for that time for what they've got. You've always got the state of the art computers and computing powered technology on starships in Star Trek. It's got to have the best and the latest state of the art. And I think in Next Generation, Geordi mentions the fact that bloody computer runs like most of the length of the bloody ship. It's huge, it's like several decks at least anyway. So these things are always massive. And in this one, Daystrom's actually he's going through. It's called the M5 computer, right? And we do ask. Well, we asked the question ourselves, and it's asked in the episode, what happened to M1 through to 4? And he basically says they didn't go to plan, which I put so the writing was on the wall straight away. As soon as you heard that, you're like, yeah, this is how this episode's going to last 47. I see.
well, that's logical. Prototypes, they don't always work.
True. This makes sense. So this is the M5, not to be confused with a future Apple CPU that may come out in a few years, or a BMW car, or they came after. The original M5 is getting installed on board the Enterprise, and what I like about this, Gray, is when Daystrom comes on board and he's doing his thing, he basically kind of wants to take over and just be left to his own devices, and everyone needs to disappear. And he is having a conversation with Spock and Kirk about this. And he's not too happy. I think basically safe to say Kirk and Spock are not too happy about this because a precursor is they actually go to a starbase and they're going to get this done. Starbase, and it's when one of Kirk's colleagues beams on board Commodore Wesley to say that this is what's going to happen. We're going to play some war games with this new M5 computer and blah blah blah. And
he also told him too right at that point. He says, "We're taking all your people off the ship and putting them on the star." And he's going like, "What are you talking about?"
He wasn't happy about that. Why?
No, there's it's like 400 people.
It's like, why do you need to do this? Like, there's no need for it. Like, you let your computer take over, but why do we need to remove the people? And he's got a point. Like, we'll sit back with our hands, but it's the same with a self-driving car at the moment. All the tests they're doing at the moment, certainly in the UK, maybe different from the States, but in the UK, someone's still got to be behind the wheel just in case something goes wrong when they make these advances in the self-driving cars, which I don't think we'll ever 100% fully properly see. There's too many things that could go wrong. But only 20 members can remain on board, and they're supposed to be key essential personnel, which they are. The kind of some of the senior crew and whatnot, and the rest of them are going to be held. I don't know if it would be detention or security on the Starbike, which seems extreme. Like, just
It
let
does
them have
seem
shore
extreme.
leave. Let them have shore leave, man. What? That was a bit of a
Yeah, it was a
writing
security. He said it was a
mistake.
security level area, something like that.
And you're like,
I'm
what? I
like,
think the writers maybe made a bit of a boo-boo with that one. There was no need for that line at all. It makes sense.
maybe, but it also it was good for the story in a sense because Kirk was pissed off about it.
Oh yeah, true.
He doesn't want to see his crew all shoved into a small station. I mean,
This is true. This is true. I don't recall what station it was, but
yeah.
So yeah, they're not happy about it, especially Bones. Bones is the moany one, definitely the moany one of the lot, the one that complains the most. He bitches and moans about everything, and I love that because I'm like that. I moan and gurn and complain a lot. So Bones is kind of me really in this grand scheme of things, and he often sticks his nose in where a surgeon's got no business sticking his nose in ever. But if he hadn't, the chemistry between those three wouldn't be there,
Yeah.
and he wouldn't be one of the key characters, so I'm kind of glad he does. But of course, the only one person that does like it, Gray, of all these, of the three of the main core characters, is Spock. He's the logical one. Logic computers are kind of lovers, really, aren't they? They're very similar to one another, and it's something that he is, in the best way you possibly could say for Vulcan, excited about this. Oh, he's followed Dr. Daystrom's career for years, he said, and he's excited to see what this can do.
There was even a part, I forget which point in the episode, but Daystrom went to Spock saying something about I'm paraphrasing, but you know a lot about computers, and he said, "Yeah, I have an A7 rating from the Vulcan Institute."
Yeah,
So
that's a good
Spock
line,
was
yeah.
doing his little unemotional bragging, saying that A7 is like the highest achievement you can get.
Oh, wow.
So he knows computers. So it's like, oh, okay, you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's so Spock's so Daystrom's got a new fan in Spock, safe to say. They kind of leave the main engineer where Daystrom's doing his thing and putting the final touches to the M5, and he's talking with Bones and telling Bones about his concerns. And he says, I've got a red alert just about here. And
Yeah.
I love this. There's little one-liners in this that are brilliant. And I'm like, I know what you mean. Like the hairs standing up in your neck. You're
Yeah.
obviously concerned, but I've got a red alert. I've never heard that one before, Gray, but I like that line.
Yeah, red alert right here. And he's going,
Right there.
like,
Not here.
there.
Not here, but there.
Yeah.
Um,
Something's wrong. He goes, something's wrong about it. I don't know.
Something is wrong indeed. Now, at the start, they're going to do basic stuff like course corrections and plotting courses and things like that. Nothing too nuts. And they're going to build up to the war games, and they've got to get to the location where the war games are. So basic maneuvers and then set course, and then we do our thing. And it's kind of muscle memory. At this stage, Kirk's asking Sulu for a standard orbit. And he's like, it's already been done. The M5's done it. He's like, I can't blame Kirk for that muscle memory. He's used to seeing these things. It's going to take a bit of time for Kirk to go, right, yeah, okay, I'm just going to sit back and chill and have a drink or something because there's nothing for him to really do. And one thing, you're not really a Doctor Who fan here, Gray, but bear with me. Both shows... there's not many similarities between them, but there's one similarity here that you see the effects of the M5 working. Now, bear in mind, this is the 60s. They've got limited technology, what they can use for CGI. And I have to while Star Trek's my favourite franchise, Doctor Who's the longest running sci-fi show of all time. So you could say Who's done a lot of things first. And I'm not saying Trek copied here, because I haven't no evidence to suggest they do or didn't. But they there's a computer here with lines going up and down, which is cool. And then there's like a circular dial to the left with a kind of wavy effect.
Yeah,
like
bunch of colored lights.
And that's very Doctor Who-esque, that thing there, the wavy lights. You see that in
that's
early Who credits.
That's typical 60s kind of.
Yeah. It could make sense. Who's to say right now that doesn't make
Look
sense?
good. I mean, it was okay.
Yeah. Even back then and now looking at it, it was kind of fine. So I see this effect of them fine and thinking, Doctor Who, nice. Now, we get the explanation of the landing party requirements from the M5. Now, Kirk initially suggests who he would take down on a landing party to the planet, and they want to correlate that with what M5 would choose. And M5 chooses 95% of the same personnel as Kirk, apart from one of the officers. And they're trying to explain, like, M5, explain why you done such and such. Oh, this officer's done this, but that officer hasn't done that. And he's like, really? And then Kirk, actually, it's not 95%, it's probably a bit less. Kirk and Bones? Yeah, Kirk and Bones were on that landing party that Kirk wanted to arrange, but they're not an M5's landing party. And the M5 basically just is like, you're not required, you're not needed for this.
Yeah, non-essential personnel. He goes, non-essential personnel. Like, oh.
Who does the voice of these? I thought it was maybe
I don't know.
James Doohan, like, because he's a voice guy,
question.
so he could have. Who knows? But you basically, because this is Daystrom's kind of baby, when M5 gives the explanation of its landing party, there's a smug look from Daystrom that I'm just
Guess what?
like,
I had to look it up really quick. Jimmy Doohan did do the voice of the M5.
there you go. See, I'm sure I recognised it, man.
You know why? It costs a lot less money to have Jimmy do it because Jimmy's a linguistic. He can do all this garbage.
You could hear it. You could hear it, man. Just because like Grace says, he's used to doing things like that. So yeah,
there you go.
After a little smug look from Daystrom on his baby being correct, which I didn't like, it was a bit demeaning. We notice slowly but surely that M5 is turning off power in certain parts of certain decks of the ship. At start, it's a bit of a concern, but then when they query it just makes sense. Daystrom's like, yeah, it's kind of normal. It's shutting off power to decks where there's no one there. It's not required because we find out, and we found out even more so throughout the episode, the M5 does need more juice than a normal computer, which makes sense. Every time we upgrade our graphics cards, it's like, okay, I'm going to have to get another 1,000 watt power supply and another
your electric
case.
bill. Oh.
Yeah, so I mean, I'd love to see an electric bill for Enterprise and the M5, man. Oofed. So everything's getting turned off slowly but surely, which makes sense. There's only 20 people on board. They're probably in key areas. All good. Now, we get unscheduled war games initially from the M5, and it was kind of a good job. It kind of pulls off most of the stuff it's supposed to do. It's like a little precursor just to throw it off the scent, because it's expecting certain war games at a certain time, but to have something before where it's doing a couple of mock shots and some tactical stuff unaware that what was coming was probably a truer test of it, and it pulls it off fine. We get a nice line from, I told you there's a few nice one-liners in this. We get a nice line from Spock standing beside Kirk having this conversation. Kirk's feeling a bit hopeless and useless, and he basically says, it's a longer line, but he says basically a starship runs on loyalty, basically saying to his friend Kirk that doesn't matter what happens, who gets replaced or who stays, who goes. Even with an M5 in charge, he basically still thinks Enterprise should still have Kirk there, regardless. Which is, I mean, great. It's a true testament to his friendship and his loyalty to the ship and to Kirk, isn't it?
Oh yeah. I mean, that's why the top three always got along so well, and they were friends as actors as well.
Yeah,
very good friends. But you could see the proper emotion, if you want to call it that, coming out of Spock just shows that, look, it doesn't matter. In fact, there was another line at some point in the episode where he said, computers are useful tools, and but I would not want to serve under one. Which makes a lot of sense too. So there's a lot of good writing in this episode. That everything kind of just made sense.
Yeah. Kirk is feeling a bit bad after this, especially so because Commodore Wesley, who had a kind of unscheduled war games just before, makes a kind of nasty comment that I didn't know about initially until they explain it after, basically saying to Kirk, good job, Captain Dunzo. And I was like, what? Captain? And then Bones says it as well. He's like, Tunsil, who the hell is that? And I'm hoping for an explanation. We do get an explanation. The explanation is a captain back in the olden days that really, well, sort of a piece of a ship, a sailing ship back in the day that didn't really have a purpose or a use.
Right, serve no purpose.
AKA Kirk. And that's why he just walks off the bridge not saying anything when he speaks to Spock. You really like the characters of Wesley and Daystrom you mentioned here, Gray?
Yeah, both the actors we had mentioned before, William Marshall, but even the guy that played Commodore Wesley was a very good actor, and I think I remember seeing him in movies back then. But I thought they were really good. They sold their part really well, each of them, especially Wesley, because when he was commanding the horror games, he's commanding 4 ships.
Yeah.
And he's a Commodore too.
Yeah.
So he really had the authority, and he really acted like, and he knew what he was doing. And so I when I saw that episode, I had little dreams like going like, wow, it'd be cool to see Wesley like in a role.
The better Wesley, not the
the better Wesley. But and I made a little comment because even though they're friends, he really made like a real prick remark to him saying Captain Dunzo. That was not
that was
not nice at all. And you knew Kirk was pissed, and stuff. But they tried to console him after that or whatever. But the best consolation as we're coming up next was he goes to his quarters, Kirk, and he's like, huffing and puffing. And all of a sudden, what do you call it? Bones walks in, and he didn't know what was under the tray. He thought it was food. Like, I'm not really hungry right now. He says, who said anything about food?
It's aperitif.
And you see these 2 little glasses with some green alcohol. This is a brew that I made up.
It's 2 wee drammies, Gray. 2 wee drams of probably whiskey or something.
But I was great because I love Shatner's expressions. He takes a drink and he goes,
"Oh, that's good shit, basically. That's good shit."
That's good. I like this. This is good.
None of that synthahol crap.
No synthahol junk. Nope. The real stuff. He's like,
was synthahol a thing in TOS or was it actually TNG that brought it in? I think it was TNG, wasn't it? Can't remember.
Positive. I have to look it up. I think it was brought in TOS at some point, but I'm not really sure.
It was definitely a bigger thing in TNG, even if it was brought in TOS. It probably wasn't mentioned much in TOS because Scotty's. I think it was because, or maybe not. I don't know. Great, you could find out. Let us know because TNG certainly when Scotty comes in the episode in TNG, he's like synthahol. Like, no, I don't want that crap from Guinan. I want the proper stuff. Guinan's like, okay, and that's when he starts the whole reminiscing thing. Gets pissed, goes to the holodeck to reminisce on the original Enterprise. No bloody A, B, C, or D, that kind of thing. Which is brilliant. So I don't know if it was mentioned in TOS, but mentioned by TOS.
It was TNG.
There you go. So it was a TOS actor on TNG, which makes sense. So anyway, right, okay.
In fact, here's an interesting little fact, though. When Roddenberry was still alive and TNG first started, he said that he decided that synthahol was invented by the Ferengi. Makes sense when you think about it. Quark in his bar and all that stuff, right?
That's true, but you think Quark would want to be selling booze? Proper booze makes more money. No, never get rid of booze in the future.
Can't do that.
So, because M5's performing so well, it's carrying on with its mission, and we get a new contact in the sensors, and it isn't a drill. It turns out that it's an old ore freighter converted to automation. So maybe a very, very early precursor of an automated starship, which I guess makes sense. There's nothing powerful or strong on this,
Doesn't have to be, right? Just flies like 1 or 2 directions.
Yeah, well, we mentioned that with the navigation officer from Enterprise, who grew up on cargo ships going at warp 1. It would still take forever because, they're going vast distances. So probably something like this, automated.
Right.
And the bridge crew can't change the course, which is a concern straight away because the M5 is piloting the ship directly for this freighter, and it shouldn't be because it wasn't called for. And Kirk's trying to tell Sulu what to change direction. I can't, Captain. Locked out M5, and you could see the panic in Kirk's eyes. And then literally the Enterprise opens fire on the ore freighter and blows it up. And that's when you see the cool phaser shots properly for the first time from the dome underneath. And the distress in Kirk, literally, he was just like, oh my, what the hell's happened here? Now, thankfully, no one was on board that. But Kirk's obviously upset, pissed off. What's just happened here? He wants control of his bloody ship back. Safe to say, you know.
Of course, he knows right then that if they go into the war games and that happens,
Yeah,
it's gonna be bad news.
yeah, because the
So
kill
it's time
switch
to
is
pull
not
the plug.
working anymore, is it? The kill switch. He's got a little thing to
Yeah.
the right of his chair, a little add-on thing module with a couple of switches, which he does turn on at the start of the episode to activate M5, but that's not working anymore. So I should probably mention that. Typical though.
Yeah, of course.
So you did mention here some serious stuff, and yes, damn right. Even though no one was killed, it's still not good, like Gray says, for the war games coming up. Now they try to then disconnect the power because they can't turn M5 off. So they get into engineer, and Scotty's asking one of his engineers to go over and make some modifications, and he does. He goes over to where the warp core is, tries to make some modifications, and then a bolt of kind of energy comes out from where the M5 console is to the left, across to the warp engines, and literally vaporizes them. Now, I don't recall what that graphic looked like in the original Grey because it was touched up here, but he literally
looked a lot better.
disappears straight away. So I'd imagine it will be a bit crappier looking in the
It was
TOS.
as far as to how he disappeared, it was very similar, but the beam was much better looking, thicker, different color, and everything in the remastered. So yeah, but I loved it later on when they were talking about after of course, the engineer gets killed. You know, they're all like flipping out because, of course, he should be flipping out. He just got killed. But the thing that was funny was Daystrom is like upset, you know, that he got killed or whatever, and he said, "Well, M5 needed more power, so it decided to tap the engines, and your engineer just simply got in the way." And then Kirk was going, or no, it was Bones, I think, got in the way, and he's like screaming at him. He says, "You just killed somebody." I said, "That's murder."
It
And he's
was
just
a
like, "Oh."
a thick beam. How many C's on that thick Grey? At least 3.
How many scenes? I don't know.
Gray likes the thick beam. So yeah, this beam literally. I mean, it makes sense what he says, right? It tried to get more power. It didn't think about who was in front of it. It just got the power. It wasn't trying to murder this. It was more like manslaughter, as we call it in the UK. It probably knew he was there, so it was murder, but he didn't intend it. He didn't intend to murder him, if that makes sense, Gray. Or M5.
I think the cool way that they did that whole scene was they left you totally guessing. Did he just tap it because M5 wanted the power, or did he say this guy's going to try to screw with me, so I'll kill him?
Yeah.
And it just happened to accomplish both things, you know. And it's like, you know, and at this point now Spock's starting to suspect, like, you know, what's going on here and why is it acting like this? You know, he's really getting suspicious of what's going on because why does it have to have this much power? Why does it have to do this? Why is it doing that?
Yeah, as a good science officer should. They have a debrief on the senior officers and what they can really do here. And Bones says to Spock that, which I found interesting. Basically, whatever he knows them. He knows them all too well, and he's like, basically, whatever you're going to say, please don't say it's fascinating because I think that just pisses Bones off. And Spock goes, no, it's not fascinating. Pause. But it is interesting, and Bones is just.
You see his eyes roll, like, and you know Spock did it on purpose.
Yeah,
because he's going like, no, but it is interesting. Like,
it was good.
It was great.
Who says Vulcans don't have humor?
That's right.
Nonsense. So yeah, after this, Kirk says makes an interesting point actually, which I didn't notice at the time, Gray. And if you recall, after seeing it a couple of times, Kirk mentions that Daystrom actually hasn't really let Spock anywhere near it. He's actually tried to keep Spock away from the M5. Which does make sense because he is the next leading expert on that ship to evaluate and help with things like that, you know. So did that click with you at all back in the day when you seen it? I'm not maybe the first time you've seen it, but later on,
yeah. I thought it was odd that, you know, something that Spock really liked so much. It was part of, you know, his thing, and he knew computers. Why wouldn't he let him talk to him. And there was times where even Spock offered to help, and Daisham said, "No, no, 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 no. I got it. I got it." So you could tell he was trying to keep him away from looking at it or what he was doing or looking at the console or anything.
Yeah, makes
Which
sense. It
all
makes
like,
sense.
which made sense as the episode went on.
The writing was on the wall, really, if you put two and two
Mhm.
together early on. Daysham's at this stage, he's kind of protecting it like it's his child, which in a way it kind of is. If you think of these guys, these scientists and whatnot, these inventions kind of are like their babies in a way, you know, so they do want to protect it and they get a bit blind and a bit mad about it all, really.
Mm.
Spock and Scotty are actually, it seems initially, successful in a manual override. In which I found amusing, the tube they're in looks so identical to the episode in Strange New Worlds where you hear Scotty's voice, but you don't see anything. You just see Ethan Peck in there. Now, obviously,
Yeah.
I should say the one in Strange New Worlds looks like the one in TOS, but I remembered that grain. I thought that's a nice little touch. They're in this like vertical Jeffries tube, you know, pulling
Now,
things out and
you know what they call those, right? In the TOS as well as Strange New Worlds. It's called the
called.
Jeffries tube. You see
Yeah,
it referenced. Yeah, they
that's
say,
what I
"Well, we're
just said.
going into the Jeffries."
A vertical Jeffries tube.
Yeah, but you know who it was named after? It was
Something
named after
Jeffrey.
a set designer for Star Trek. I believe his name was Matt Jeffries,
There you
and
go.
so they named the tube after him because he built the thing.
A tube. Imagine
And
naming a tube after someone, man. I mean,
yeah,
it makes sense. You can't say they're in the tube. This will have the same ring to it. He's in the
so,
Jeffries
yes,
tube.
some writer just kind of put in there, "It's a Jeffries tube," and they go, "Oh, okay," and that's stuck. So
That makes sense. That was a nice little
yeah.
touch I noticed, and I liked that, to be fair.
Mhm.
So they think they're initially successful. Scotty's trying to replace something. Initially, he's getting a bit of a overwhelming. I don't know if it was like a flash or something. It wasn't the beam from before. It was like a flash. Like M5's trying to fight back or something, but he kind of
Right.
bears it and puts this device in, triggers the override, and they think, you know, they're successful, they're good, and everything's great. But Daystrom, just before they complete this, is very animated at the start. Like he's at the bottom of the vertical Jeffrey strip. He's trying to stop them. He's almost reaching out. No,
Yeah.
no, please, no. Like a bit didn't make sense. He seemed a bit nuts almost. You know, Spock literally had to grab him. Kirk literally had to grab him and stop him
Yeah.
from getting interfering. And then you're thinking at this stage, Gray, that this guy's a couple of dilithium crystals short of a warp core, isn't he?
Yeah, just a little. They're starting to suspect something going on.
He's a bit nuts. He's a bit nuts, you know. So, but then Kirk's just like, "Come on, make this end." You think this is too easy? I believed that it actually, because it didn't have too long to go in episodes when I was watching it this stage. And thinking, have they done it really? Chekhov and Sulu are still unable to maneuver the ship. Here we go. Turns out this was really sneaky and genius. The M5 rerouted the controls, right? But kept the circuit they were working on active to throw them off the chase. Now, Gray mentions here, smart, evil computer. There's AI at work properly, Gray. I thought this bit was brilliant, didn't you?
Oh, I did too. It was great. It made total sense in the world, and it actually had real electrical theory, because what Spock said is they sent a pulse, an electronic pulse to keep it thinking it was alive when it really wasn't. So
Yeah.
all they saw was they were seeing the sparks, they were seeing this and that, and
That's
made
probably what
sense to
that flash
them.
of light is that Scotty got
Yeah.
now. Yeah.
Yep. And I thought it was brilliant that the computer, figured out like, oh, all right, I'll mess you up. It says you're not taking me out. I'll just, send you on a. And even Spock goes, I think we were going on what was called a wild goose chase.
I mean, it does make sense when you think about it. A really supercomputer like that knows exactly where they're going on the ship, what they're doing. It can see what they're doing at all times, and of course, it knows what they're going to do. So it tries to throw them off the scent,
Hmm.
and it does make sense. Now we're starting to approach upon the smaller Armada fleet that are going to have proper scheduled war games with, and we did touch on this at the start. About Gray mentioned that there was only ever a couple of starships at any one time for obvious limitations back in the 60s. but we see all other 4 starships, excluding the Enterprise. So that's 5. And I'm asking here how many were in the original. So how did they do this scene back in the original grade with all these other ships? Did you only ever see the Lexington at one time, and then one of the other ships, and then you saw the registration numbers and whatnot? Oh,
So from what I understand and what I can remember, they actually shot the other starships were all the one model of the Enterprise, and all they did was just change the name and the number, and then they would shoot the scenes, and that's it because they couldn't afford to build, too many Enterprises. I think in the entire series, the original series, there was only one or two, and that's it.
wow.
And one still survives today that's been totally refurbished and is, I think, it's hanging in one museum somewhere now.
Well, whoever
Um,
owns the other ones probably had to pay a fortune for that, because you pay
yeah, I
fortune
don't.
for Starship
Yeah,
models.
there was also some that were built not to show the entire thing. Like in other words, they would build like half of it, and the other side of it was full of wires and junk because they
To
never
light it
shot that
up.
side. Yeah. So there was some that were not really completely built. They were done that way for a reason. Because again, remember they didn't have CGI. Everything was totally hand built. There's a video online where they go to they show the original Enterprise and the work that was done on it and everything. And I'll tell you, the people that built stuff like that back then were extremely talented. I mean, that was not an easy ship to build to make look real, and they took such care with it. It was unbelievable
Oh yeah,
to
they
pull
had
it
to think
off. Nothing
outside the
like that,
box.
Yeah. Oh
100%
yeah.
had to think outside the box, because you're limited in what you've got. But it's remarkable, even more so, what they managed to pull off.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
so we do see all 4 starships at the same time, which is really impressive. I mean, the Lexington that Commodore Wesley's
Honestly.
in command of, which, bear in mind, Commodore's like Admiral Light, so he's still ahead of Kirk really in the rankings. Um, that's got most of the action, I guess, in this, and it takes one of the biggest beatings. But as the M5 piloting the ship approaches, it is literally getting ready to destroy them. Um, it's on a mission, literally, to wipe them out. It then hits Commodore Wesley's ship, the Lexington, uh, with phasers on at full strength. And you see the whole time Kirk sitting in the captain's chair, Grant. He's absolutely pissing a sweat. Like he's just like, oh my god, what we're watching. I'm witnessing a massacre here, kind of thing. What a
Yep.
horrible position to be in, to be the mighty Captain Kirk and be able to do nothing. You know,
Yeah. I
it's
mean, he's just like he couldn't do anything. The M5 is maneuvering over and over again to shoot these ships, and this is where you see the really beautiful remastering. You see the swooping ships, you see the phasers shooting out and hitting the other starships and so forth. It looked really good.
yeah,
But
looks
yeah,
stunning.
initially when they started to hit the Commodore ship, of course, you hear all of a sudden 53 people are dead, and Shatner as Kirk is really showing his emotion, going like, "All these people are dying in front of me. I can't do anything," and
Yeah,
it was terrible. And he just was like, "What is he gonna do?"
yeah. Um, you see Wesley actually trying to talk to Kirk. You can, from the Enterprise's view, you can see and hear Wesley. But Wesley cannot hear or see Kirk, and he's like, "What you doing, man? What you trying to prove?" And Kirk's like, "Hello, can you hear me? Nothing's happening at all.
Nothing. Yep.
Done on purpose, I think, by M5, obviously." And as Gray mentioned just there, the look in his face of distraught. It was good acting from Shatner. He's really struggling to see what's going on here. Um, and then they have the great idea, because where it comes from is the reason it's so good at what it does is it seems almost human like, this M5, but with the rapid speed of a computer. And it turns out that it was based on human engrams.
Right.
And those human engrams, I don't know, brainwaves or whatever, are taken from Dr. Daystrom himself. And this is making sense. And okay. So they're putting 2 and 2 together here, and they're going, right, why don't we try and talk to it like it's a child? Because it's kind of acting like that, but it's it's super intelligent and dangerous at the same time. Um, let's talk to the M5 to actually try and talk it down, which I think is kind of genius, really.
Sure.
And Daystrom's basically, trying to talk it down, but then he loses his bit.
She starts losing it. Yeah, slowly. The actor did a great job. At first, he started
Yeah.
sound like he was making sense, and he was saying like, we cannot kill you. You've murdered those people, and what and he's like, oh, and then all of a sudden he starts flipping out and starts talking about his career when he was younger, and that they made
You're like,
a fool out
what?
of him when he was older, and like he's like, and like Bones is looking at him going like, geez, should I give him a shot now or what should I
Yeah,
do?
but when you see what Bones is basically, then Bones goes, he looks like he's about to have a nervous breakdown. And that's
Yep.
when Spock goes up, right, Vulcan nerve pinch, let's take this poor bugger, put him out of his misery, take him away. And then they're like, what they're going to do now? Because, Daystrom was talking to it like it was his child in a way. But then, after Vulcan nerve pinch, best acting from a Vulcan nerve pinch ever. The Grey mentions here. That's a very good point, actually.
I'm telling you, I've seen the Vulcan neck pinch so many times in different reactions to whatever, right? I've
Oh.
never seen anybody react so good. He was like the actor was like perfectly whatever face, right? And as soon as the pinch happens, he just in like 2 seconds he just goes "Bah!" like this. It was great. It was perfect. And all of a sudden he's like, "Bleh," and I'm like, I couldn't help myself. It looked so
Well,
good.
do you remember earlier on in the episode where they first tried to take out the M5 and Kirk walks into engineering and he's zapped, right? Now, this
Yeah,
makes absolutely zero sense, but he's zapped, right, with a low kind of power pulse, like a warning pulse. And then what
yeah.
does Shatner do? He dives to the left, which makes absolute no sense in physics whatsoever. If anything, you just
And he
drop
went
or you fall
backwards.
back. But he dived to the left. I'm like, what? Okay, so
I
Daystrom
think
can
that was
act
another
better than you.
I think what that was is again the constraints of the set because as they came in, if he had to fly backwards, you would have not seen him. Number one, he probably would have hit the doorway thing or whatever that was. So they had to make it more dramatic. So somebody said, "Well, just have him go over to the side." Like, okay,
Oh, we'll buy it. We'll buy it.
okay.
But yeah, so at this stage, it's now up to Kirk to try and talk the M5 down, which is genius, really.
Of course.
And Kirk asks the M5, like he's like, "You've killed all these officers." And
Wait,
M5's,
before he did that though, I thought was really
oh,
interesting. He was seeing. He says, he was explaining that you've killed these people, whatever, and he goes, scan I don't know, that was I don't think it was a Lexington. I think it was one of the other ships, the
mm-hmm.
Potemkin or whatever. He says, "Scan the ship. What do you detect? Any life?" And he goes, "No life." And when I remember when I originally saw the episode for the first time, and I heard that line, "No life," I'm going, "Oh my god, that's 430 people or more gone
What
on
was
that
it
ship."
though? It wasn't. It says 53. I don't recall anyone
No,
ever
no, no, no.
saying
That
over.
was no 53 on the Commodore ship on the first attack. But as it kept on attacking, remember it kept on attacking, swooping around,
Yeah,
attacking
good
again.
point.
And then the one ship was dead in it was dead in the water basically, and it had killed everyone on board the ship. And he said, "Scan, is there any life on that ship?" And he goes, "No life."
How
You
do you
know.
get? How do you kill everyone on board a starship without actually blowing or partial blowing up a starship? The
Well,
chances
remember
are, I
not
can't.
really because if it had taken out life support and
True,
whatever,
true, true,
they
true.
would all,
I can't really nitpick too much of TOS considering it was at the very start back in the 60s. It would be a bit unfair to really nitpick against it. But yeah, no, Gray makes a point that Kirk is trying to convince it, because M5 doesn't think what it's done was killing or what it's done was wrong. It was defending itself, he knows, he M5 knows that it can't really be killing there. You don't do that to other. Is it in a way maybe thinks it's human a little bit because it's got these human
yeah,
engrams?
exactly.
And Kirk says, what's the penalty for killing? And it says death. Now, I mentioned here, like, not we getting a political debate, but back in the 60s, it certainly was different.
Mm.
Certain states in America and certain places around the world, the death penalty
Capital
was, and
punishment.
yeah, it
Yeah.
was still in place then. Now there's not many states that have it in America,
Right.
but there's still a couple, and there's not many developed countries, if any, apart from that actually have that death penalty. So at the time, it was accurate, but certainly if
Right.
they were to rewrite that now,
Yeah, it
it'd
would be a
probably
little different.
be something else, wouldn't it? Like, what's
Mhm.
the penalty? you rot in digital health the rest of your life.
It wouldn't have worked. In this
It
case,
wouldn't
it
have
worked just
worked, no.
perfect.
But it did work perfect, yeah, back then. So it's, you can see the computer, 2 and 2 equals 4, and as soon as he says death, it then shuts itself down.
And I will say, I want to give a little kudos to Doohan that did the voice, because when he said what was the penalty, there's this, I always say this pregnant pause where the computer doesn't say anything. M5, and he just goes death, and then he says, and so what? What was the second thing he said after that? And he was talking about, he says, so what are you going to do about it? And he goes, this unit must die.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden,
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
it's perfect.
Good voice acting from Jimmy. And it's great mentions here, murder is against the laws of God and man. So, I mean, a computer, what would a computer give a shit about religion? But again, it's based on human engrams of the doctor, so of Dr. Daystrom, so it understands that to some extent. So it does turn itself off, and it realizes what it's done. So it doesn't blow itself up because that'd be killing everyone else. It just turns itself off so that the other ships can then take it out, because the other ships, Commodore Wesley contacts the Starfleet HQ to tell him what's happened and get permission to take out the Enterprise, which is granted. So you're saying all these ships coming towards the Enterprise going to blow up, and that's what M5 wanted, so that it can be punished for what it done, which is poetic justice and kind of blows my mind a little bit, actually, Gray.
It wants to kill itself, like Spock even said. He said, "This M5 is committing suicide."
Yeah, but it could blow itself up. It could just set an auto-destruct. It didn't.
True, but it didn't want to take out the human life. So
that is suicide. If you just power yourself down and let someone to kill you, that's murder then. I guess that's the difference. Right. So it wasn't really suicide in a way. In a way it was, in a way it wasn't. But as Wesley's ship closes in, he does break off pursuit last minute, because he looks, he can see, and using his sensors, powers down, the Enterprise is dead in the water. It looks like, anyway, why would I fire on a ship that's dead in the water? But obviously we think, oh, maybe it's a trap from M5. Anyone else would have tried to blow up Gray, but he didn't. He actually breaks off attack, and it's kind of thank God that happens, because Kirk then says, I know Wesley well, and that's the kind of thing he would do. I'm preying on his humanity, and he pulls through. Thank God, otherwise they're gonski, So we get a last funny line, Gray, from Spock when they're in the turbo lift, which was absolutely
it's brilliant. Really good one.
It would have been interesting. He basically says to Bones, if your human engrams were imprinted onto the M5, it would have been a mess of illogical thoughts or something along those lines. And I'm just
the
like,
flood of illogical thoughts would have been fascinating.
I was just like, what? You could almost see a smile just slightly on Spock, and Bones is just like, you SOB, man. Yeah, it's classic Spock and Bones moment that you put here, Gray. So that's why those three work really, really well. You have a little note at the end, Gray, and you can obviously give us your score for your.
Yeah, I mean, I just was mentioning, we kind of got into it earlier, but as far as the remaster being so good, if anybody out there, similar-ish to Trev, has not seen TOS or not much of it, you really need to go back and watch the remastered. The remastered is great. I would only say, out of the 79 episodes or whatever, I would say probably around 3, 4, 5 episodes truly are dated. But the rest of them really aren't that dated. I mean, the stories and the writing and the acting and everything still holds up really well.
Sure.
And because it's remastered, it's far easier to I don't want to say it the wrong way, but far easier to take, I guess, if you want to look at it that way. Because it looks just so much more beautiful. I mean, I never saw the Enterprise looking that good ever. So to me, it's almost like watching a new episode. And there are certain episodes where they're just little things, like for instance, in the original series, when the Enterprise pulled up to a planet, it was usually always the same 1 or 2 planets. It would just pull up the planet. it was always the same planet. This one was okay. Maybe this one's a little different color, but it was really pretty much the same thing all the time.
Yeah.
Well, they made a point of it in the remaster that every time it pulls up to a planet, it's something different. Totally. There's a planet that looks like Earth-like. There's a planet that looks volcanic. There's a planet that looks. So every time it pulls up to a planet throughout the 79 episodes, there's a whole bunch of different planets.
Great. It doesn't pull up. It's
Yeah.
not a car.
No, I know. Goes into orbit, whatever. And instead of just going like this, like here's the planet, and the old effects were, and that was it. Now they actually show it. They actually show it kind of curving around the planet.
See, they had limitations back in the day, obviously, and Gray says the Enterprise only goes like straight lines from left to right and forwards, backwards, that kind of thing. But sometimes when it was going in that straight line, or especially diagonal line, it still looked like it was janky.
Yeah.
Now, like, I'm sorry, if you put the Enterprise on a model, the model of the Enterprise on a kind of little trolley thing to move it along, it shouldn't be going up and down. It's as if a guy was holding it like a puppet and he was drunk. So even back then, I'm convinced, even with the limitations, they could have got that to go smoothly in a straight line. But that's my small nitpick. That's it. It's not a complaint.
Hey,
it's a nitpick.
they're lucky they actually pulled off a show like that. It was nothing had ever been done like that ever, and the money that show cost was back then it was a huge amount, more money than spent than any other show, which is why back then CBS wanted to cancel it after 2 seasons because they're going like, we can't do this, man. This is like too expensive. And,
Yeah.
you know, but they had such a huge letter writing campaign that they couldn't say no. And I think, like I explained before, they got their way in a way. They said, okay, we're going to let the 3rd season go, but we're going to kill you off by putting you in the Friday night 10 p.m. slot. So they're kind of like, to them, it was like a good move, going like, yeah, okay, we'll give you the show because we don't want to be embarrassed, but we're killing it off after the season, 3rd season.
USOB. Gray, what's your episode score?
This episode, oh yeah, easy 9 out of 10. That's easy.
This is one of the better ones for you, hands down.
Definitely one of the better ones. One of the more top 10 or 20.
Yeah, have to agree with that.
Or whatever.
No surprise, I gave it a 8.5 because
there's another good one. I don't know if I put it on your list or not, but if I didn't, you should say Doomsday Machine.
Oh yeah. That's a classic as well. Yeah.
Wow, the remastered Doomsday Machine. Holy smokes, the remastering looks so good.
Maybe we could do that next time.
Yeah, I mean the machine, the actual thing, is like 25 times better than the original. Yeah. Wow, it does look really good.
And that really helps.
Yeah, maybe we can cover that.
So, I mean, yeah, so Greg gives it a 9 out of 10. I give it 8.5 out of 10. That's massive kudos and respect to the episode. It still holds its own after all these years. But people let us know below what you want to see more reviews of older Trek shows. If so, which episodes, which series, which seasons, let us know below. And like Gray says, a cheeky thumbs up while you're there. But don't forget Gray's show as well, GGR. It is delayed for 2 weeks for personal reasons, but we will be doing that in 2 weeks yesterday. And he can be found at Gray's Green Room on YouTube and podcasts and platforms. And then tonight we're doing our gaming show where our friend Nick, again, Extreme PC UK on the YouTubes and the podcasting platforms. So you could tune in if you like a bit of gaming, see us then. But I think that'll be us until probably next week, Grace. So thank you for coming along, mate. Until then, do your thing, man.
Live long and prosper, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.